How could a simple favor for family turn into the ultimate betrayal? When I opened a credit card to save my son's life, I never imagined I'd watch his wife post luxury vacation photos with my money. Now, as they pull into the driveway and spot the "for sale" sign on the house they thought was theirs, I wonder if they ever realized who really held all the cards. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jarring me from sleep with the urgency that only family emergencies can bring. Janelle's voice was breathless, panicked in a way I'd never heard before. "Franklin, thank God you picked up. It's Ethan. He's in the hospital. We need your help." I was already reaching for my clothes, my heart hammering against my ribs. "What happened? Is he okay?" "The doctors found something during his routine checkup. They need to operate immediately, but our insurance—" "Franklin, they're saying it won't cover the procedure. We need $15,000 by tomorrow or they can't do the surgery." 15,000. The number hit me like a physical blow, but this was my son we were talking about. Ethan Carter Mercer, 33 years old with his whole life ahead of him. I'd raised him after his mother Linda and I divorced, watched him build his web development business from nothing, celebrated when he married Janelle 3 years ago. "I'll be right there," I said, already mentally calculating what I could liquidate quickly. "Which hospital?" "St. Mary's General. Franklin, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but Ethan needs his father right now." The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of morning traffic and worst-case scenarios. I'd always prided myself on being prepared. 30 years as an insurance claim supervisor had taught me that disasters rarely announce themselves politely. But nothing prepares you for the possibility of losing your only child. I found them in the surgical waiting area, Janelle pacing near the windows while Ethan sat hunched in one of those uncomfortable plastic chairs that hospitals seem to specialize in. He looked pale, drawn, avoiding my eyes when I approached. "Dad," he said quietly, not standing to greet me. "Thanks for coming." Janelle immediately took charge of the conversation, as she always did. At 29, she had the kind of aggressive confidence that steamrolled over anyone who didn't match her energy. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled despite the early hour, her makeup flawless, even in crisis. "Franklin, the billing department needs to know how we're handling payment before they'll schedule the procedure. The surgeon is booked solid, but they can fit Ethan in this afternoon if we guarantee payment." I studied my son's face, looking for some explanation of what was wrong, but he kept his gaze fixed on the floor. "What exactly is the procedure for? What did they find?" Janelle waved a dismissive hand. "It's complicated medical terminology. The important thing is getting it done quickly. Every hour we wait increases the risk." Something felt off about her evasiveness, but this wasn't the time to press for details. "I can open a credit card account. My credit score should qualify for a limit high enough to cover it." "Really?" The relief in Janelle's voice seemed genuine. "Franklin, that would save his life." We spent the next 2 hours at the bank branch across from the hospital. The loan officer, a efficient woman named Patricia Holloway, expedited the application process when I explained the circumstances. By noon, I had a new credit card with a $20,000 limit and emergency access to the funds. Back at the hospital, I handed the card to Janelle along with the PIN I'd set up. "This should cover everything. Just make sure they bill it directly for medical expenses." She took the card without quite meeting my eyes. "Of course. Franklin, I know you think I know we don't always get along, but this means everything to us, to Ethan." "He's my son," I said simply. "Family takes care of family." That's when Linda arrived, swept into the waiting room with her usual dramatic flair. At 59, my ex-wife had maintained the kind of polished appearance that came from her new husband, Stuart's comfortable income. She hugged Ethan first, then gave me a polite nod. "Franklin, Janelle told me what you're doing. That's very generous." There was something in her tone that rankled me. Generous? As if helping my own son was some kind of optional charity. "Any parent would do the same," I replied. Linda exchanged a look with Janelle that I couldn't quite read. "Of course. It's just... Well, you've always been very involved in their finances. Maybe this is a good opportunity to let them handle more things independently going forward. Involved in their finances. As if the years of helping with down payments, covering emergency repairs, and letting them live in my house rent-free was somehow inappropriate meddling." Janelle nodded enthusiastically. "Franklin, you're so sweet to worry about us, but we're adults. We can handle our own responsibilities." She patted my arm in a way that felt condescending. "I know your generation likes to stay hands-on, but Ethan and I have everything under control." My generation. As if being 61 meant I was some doddering old fool who couldn't understand how the modern world worked. "Right," I said quietly. "Well, the card is there if you need it." Thank you, Franklin. Really. Janelle was already turning back to Ethan, dismissing me from the conversation. Honey, I'm going to go handle the payment arrangements. Your dad can keep you company. She walked toward the billing office with confident strides, my credit card in her designer handbag. I sat down next to Ethan, trying to read his expression. You okay, son? I know this must be scary. He finally looked at me, and for a moment I saw something that looked like guilt flicker across his face. Yeah, Dad. Just tired, you know? Thanks for helping out. Always, I said. That's what family does. But even as I said it, I noticed how he kept checking his phone, how he seemed more anxious about something on the screen than about his upcoming surgery. When Janelle returned, she whispered something in his ear that made him nod and give me a forced smile. All set, she announced. The procedure is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Franklin, you don't need to stay. I know you have things to do. Being dismissed from my own son's medical crisis stung more than I wanted to admit. I can stay if you need. We're fine, Janelle said firmly. Really. We'll call you with updates. I drove home feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. The vague medical details, Ethan's strange behavior, the way Janelle had taken control of every interaction. But this was my son's health we were talking about. If I was being overly suspicious, it was better to err on the side of caution. That evening, I got a text from my credit card company confirming an overseas transaction for $3,147 at something called Bali Paradise Resort. I stared at the notification for a full minute, certain there had been some kind of mistake. I called the customer service number immediately. There's been fraudulent activity on my account. I'm showing a charge in Indonesia, but the card is supposed to be used for medical expenses in the United States. The representative was helpful, but firm. Sir, the charge was processed with the correct card number and PIN. If you didn't authorize this transaction, you'll need to file a fraud report. Can you tell me exactly what was purchased? It shows as a hotel booking confirmation for, let me see, a 7-day luxury package for 2 guests, checking in tomorrow. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. There had to be an explanation. Maybe the billing system had made an error. Maybe someone had stolen the card information. Maybe. But even as I tried to rationalize it, a cold certainty was settling in my chest. I pulled up Janelle's Instagram account on my laptop, something I rarely did but felt compelled to check now. Her most recent post, uploaded just 2 hours ago, showed a passport and boarding pass artfully arranged on what looked like expensive luggage. The caption read, "Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need when you need it most. Starot haar blessed hartshudder new adventures, sakerner healing." The boarding pass was clearly visible in the photo. Destination? Denpasar, Bali. I sat in my kitchen for a long time that night, staring at that photo and feeling something fundamental shift inside me. 30 years of investigating insurance fraud had taught me to recognize patterns, to spot the tells that separated legitimate claims from elaborate deceptions, and this had all the hallmarks of the latter. The next morning, I called my old friend Marvin Ross and asked him to meet me at Bean and Barrel, the coffee shop where we'd been having our weekly breakfast for the past 5 years since his semi-retirement from law. Marvin had handled my divorce, helped me navigate the legal complexities of starting my consulting business, and served as the closest thing I had to a confidant. "You look like hell, Franklin," he said by way of greeting, settling his considerable frame into the booth across from me. At 68, Marvin had the kind of weathered face that came from decades of courtroom battles, but his eyes were still sharp as ever. "I think I've been played," I said without preamble, sliding my phone across the table to show him Janelle's Instagram post. And not for the first time. Marvin studied the image, then looked up at me with raised eyebrows. "Want to start from the beginning?" So I told him everything, the emergency call, the hospital visit, the credit card, the mysterious overseas charge. Marvin listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes on a napkin in his careful lawyer's handwriting. "How much have you given them over the years?" he asked when I finished. The question forced me to really think about it, to add up all the small favors and temporary loans that had accumulated over the past 3 years. The down payment on their car was $8,000. I covered their wedding photography when their original photographer canceled. That was another $3,000. There was the time their roof needed emergency repairs. Rough estimate, Franklin. Probably close to $40,000, maybe more. Marvin whistled low. And how much of that has been paid back? None of it. But that's not the point. They're family. Ethan's my son. And what has your son contributed to this relationship exactly? The question hit harder than I expected. What had Ethan contributed? He visited dutifully on holidays, usually with Janelle directing the conversation. He called every few weeks, conversations that rarely lasted more than 10 minutes and usually ended with some mention of their latest financial stress. When had he last asked about my life, my health, my concerns? He's building his business, I said weakly. Web development is competitive. Franklin, I've seen his Instagram too. That boy posts pictures of expensive dinners twice a week. Their house is full of furniture that costs more than my monthly mortgage payment. Either his business is doing better than you think, or they're living off my generosity. Marvin nodded grimly. Tell me about this house they're living in. That was another complicated story. 3 years ago, when Ethan and Janelle were looking for their first home, they'd fallen in love with a suburban colonial that was slightly out of their budget. The seller was motivated. A divorce situation where both parties wanted a quick, clean sale. I'd offered to purchase the property outright and let them live there while they saved up for their own down payment. Just until we get on our feet, Ethan had promised. 2 years max. The plan was simple. They'd pay me rent equivalent to what they'd been paying for their apartment, and when they were ready, we'd transfer the deed and they'd take over the mortgage. Clean, simple, family helping family. Except the deed transfer had never happened. Every time I brought it up, there was some excuse. They wanted to wait until after their vacation, or until Ethan landed a bigger client, or until they'd saved more for the transaction costs. The rent payments had started strong, but gradually became sporadic, then stopped altogether about 6 months ago. So you own the house they're living in, Marvin said. It wasn't a question. Technically, yes, but it was always meant to be temporary. And they know this? Of course they know. We've discussed the transfer multiple times. Marvin was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee with the kind of deliberate movements that meant he was thinking hard about something. Franklin, I want you to consider the possibility that this transfer was never going to happen, that from their perspective, they've found a way to live in a house they could never afford, funded by a father-in-law who's too polite to demand accountability. The suggestion stung because it rang true. How many times had I swallowed my frustration when they missed rent payments? How many times had I accepted vague promises about next month, or when this big project comes through? I'd told myself I was being understanding, flexible, family-oriented. Maybe I'd just been a pushover. There's something else, I said, pulling up more of Janelle's social media on my phone. Look at this. The Instagram account was a catalog of lifestyle inflation that should have been impossible on their claimed income. Designer handbags that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Weekend trips to expensive resorts. A kitchen renovation that had clearly cost tens of thousands of dollars in my house. When did they do this renovation? Marvin asked, scrolling through photos of granite countertops and custom cabinetry. Last fall. Janelle said they got a great deal through one of Ethan's clients who was a contractor. Did you approve this? Did you see any invoices? Any contracts? I hadn't. I'd been presented with the renovation as a fait accompli, Janelle explaining that they'd wanted to surprise me with the improvements to our house. At the time, I'd been touched by their consideration. Now, I was beginning to see it differently. They've been treating your house like their personal ATM, Marvin said bluntly. Free rent, free renovations, free everything. And now they've graduated to direct cash withdrawals. My phone buzzed with a notification. Another Instagram post from Janelle, this one showing 2 cocktails on what was clearly a tropical beach. The caption read, Day 1 of healing and recovery. So grateful for family who understand what really matters. Ballabound, blessed, family first. Family who understand what really matters, I read aloud. I'm apparently family who understands that what really matters is funding their vacation. Marvin reached across the table and put his hand on my arm. Franklin, you're one of the most decent men I know, but decency without boundaries isn't kindness, it's enablement. And these two have been enabled long enough. That afternoon, I drove past their house, my house, and noticed something I'd somehow missed before. Vera Collins, my neighbor who lived 2 doors down, was working in her garden. Vera was the kind of woman who knew everyone's business without being malicious about it, the unofficial neighborhood information hub. Franklin, she called out as I slowed down. How are you doing? I heard about Ethan's surgery. Surgery. Right. The surgery that was supposedly happening while my son was boarding a plane to Indonesia. What exactly did you hear, Vera? She glanced around conspiratorially, then approached my car window. Well, Janelle mentioned it at the block party last weekend. Said Ethan was facing some serious medical procedure, very expensive, insurance wouldn't cover it. She was quite dramatic about it, actually, tears in her eyes, talking about how frightening it was to think about losing him. She was at a block party last weekend? Oh, yes, she and Ethan both. They seemed to be in great spirits, actually. Janelle was showing everyone pictures of this amazing vacation they had planned. Said they'd been saving for months, that Ethan needed some recovery time somewhere beautiful and peaceful. The pieces were clicking together with sickening clarity. The emergency surgery had been planned well in advance, timed perfectly with a vacation they'd been anticipating for months. The tears, the panic, the desperate phone call, all of it had been performance art designed to extract money from the one person they knew would never say no to a family emergency. Vera, I said carefully, did Janelle mention how they were paying for this vacation? Well, that's the thing, Vera said, lowering her voice. She kept talking about how everything worked out perfectly and how sometimes the universe provides exactly what you need. I got the impression someone had helped them out financially, but she was being very mysterious about it. The universe provides. As if my credit card and my concern for my son's well-being were some kind of cosmic gift rather than the result of a carefully orchestrated deception. That evening, I sat in my home office and really looked at the paperwork related to their house for the first time in months. The deed was clear and unambiguous. Title held by Franklin Mercer. There was no mortgage, no lien, no legal obligation to transfer ownership. The house was mine, free and clear, and they were living in it as my guests who had just stolen $15,000 from me. My laptop chimed with a calendar reminder I'd set months ago. Deed transfer meeting, E&J. The appointment I'd scheduled to finally sign the house over to them, planned for the week after they returned from their recovery vacation. I stared at that reminder for a long time, thinking about patterns and consequences, about respect and exploitation, about the difference between being generous and being a fool. Then I deleted the appointment and started making a very different kind of plan. The Bali posts started appearing the next morning, each one a fresh slap in the face. Janelle had always been active on social media, but this trip took her documentation to a new level. Every few hours brought a new image: crystal blue pools, tropical cocktails garnished with orchids, sunset views from what was clearly an expensive resort balcony. The captions were particularly galling. Day 2 of Ethan's recovery journey. The doctors were right. Sometimes healing happens best in paradise. Grateful, shakir, blessed, jas healing vibes. Recovery journey. As if lounging poolside with a Mai Tai was a prescribed medical treatment. I found myself checking her account obsessively, each post stoking my anger higher. There was Ethan, supposedly recovering from major surgery, playing volleyball on the beach. There was Janelle, supposedly worried about medical bills, getting what looked like an expensive spa treatment. But it was the third day that really broke something inside me. The post showed both of them at what appeared to be the resort's high-end restaurant, multiple courses spread across their table, a bottle of wine that I recognized as costing at least $200. Janelle's caption read, "Celebrating Ethan's clean bill of health. The surgery went perfectly and he's recovering so well. Sometimes you just have to trust that everything happens for a reason. Life is too short not to live it fully. Shako living our best life. Trust the process. Blessed. Clean bill of health. Surgery went perfectly. I called the hospital immediately. I'm checking on my son, Ethan Mercer. He was supposed to have surgery yesterday morning." There was a pause while the receptionist checked her system. "I'm sorry, sir, but I don't show any patient by that name scheduled for surgery this week. Are you sure you have the right facility?" "He was in your emergency department 2 days ago. Ethan Carter Mercer." Another pause. "I'm showing a brief visit to our urgent care clinic, but the patient was discharged the same day with no follow-up required. No surgery was scheduled or performed." I hung up the phone with hands that were actually shaking. No surgery, no medical emergency, no life-threatening condition requiring immediate intervention. It had all been a lie. I tried calling Ethan's phone first, then Janelle's. Both went straight to voicemail. I sent text messages that showed as delivered but received no responses. It was as if they'd decided that once they had my money, they no longer needed to maintain the pretense of caring about my feelings or concerns. That's when I noticed something else in Janelle's photos. Details that became more apparent as I studied them more carefully. There was a man who kept appearing in the background of her shots, sometimes reflected in windows or mirrors, sometimes just at the edge of the frame. Not Ethan. Someone taller, with different hair, different build. I screenshot the clearest image and enlarged it on my computer. The man looked familiar, but I couldn't place him immediately. Then I remembered. Kyle Granger, one of Ethan's college friends who'd been at their wedding. I'd never liked him. He had the kind of aggressive charm that set my teeth on edge, and I'd noticed how he looked at Janelle even then. More concerning was what I wasn't seeing in the photos. While Janelle's posts were constant and elaborate, there were very few pictures that actually showed her and Ethan together. When they did appear in the same shot, there was a distance between them, a tension that was visible even in carefully curated social media images. On day 4, the post took a different tone. Instead of couples shots and romantic sunset pictures, Janelle was posting solo images with cryptic captions. Sometimes you have to choose yourself first. Self-love, Song, Independence, Zabur, New Chapter. Then, later that same day, not everything that looks perfect on the surface is perfect underneath. Learning to trust my instincts. Growth. Durchat's truth, Schatzturm, moving forward. Vera called me that evening, her voice bubbling with gossip. Franklin, you need to see what's happening on social media. That friend of Ethan's, Kyle, is posting pictures from the same resort. And honey, let me tell you, the pictures he's posting tell a very different story than Janelle's. I didn't have Kyle's social media information, but Vera was happy to send me screenshots. Kyle's Instagram was less curated than Janelle's, more candid, and what it showed was a very different version of their tropical paradise. There was Kyle at the resort bar with a woman who was definitely not his wife. There was Ethan, clearly drunk, stumbling through what looked like a heated argument with someone off camera. There was a photo of Kyle and Janelle having what appeared to be an intimate conversation by the pool, Ethan nowhere to be seen. Look at the timestamps, Vera pointed out when she called back. Kyle posted that picture of him and Janelle at 2 a.m. local time. Where do you think Ethan was? I didn't want to think about where Ethan was. My son's marriage was imploding in real time, funded by money they'd stolen from me under false pretenses, and I was watching it happen through social media posts like some kind of twisted reality show. But it was the next morning that brought the most damaging evidence. Kyle had posted a video, just a few seconds of resort nightlife, the camera panning across the crowded bar. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was Ethan with his arms around a woman who definitely wasn't Janelle. The woman was young, blonde, wearing the kind of barely there dress that left little to the imagination. Ethan was kissing her neck while she laughed and pressed closer to him. The video was time-stamped at the same time Janelle had posted her cryptic message about trusting her instincts. My phone buzzed with a credit card alert. Another charge, this one for $1,847 at something called Bali Luxury Spa and Wellness Center. Apparently, marital drama was expensive to manage. I sat in my home office that night, surrounded by documents I hadn't looked at in months. The house deed, the original purchase agreement, the informal rental arrangement I'd drawn up with Ethan and Janelle, the bank statements showing 3 years of sporadic rent payments that had gradually dwindled to nothing. And then I found something I'd forgotten about, the original email exchange when they'd first asked to live in the house. Ethan's message was casual, almost offhand. Dad, we found this great place, but we're a little short on the down payment. Could you help us out? We'll pay you back as soon as we can get our finances sorted. Help them out. As if I was some distant acquaintance doing them a minor favor, not a father providing his son with a rent-free home for 3 years. But it was Janelle's follow-up email that really caught my attention. Franklin, this is such a perfect solution for everyone. We get to live somewhere amazing while we save up, and you get to help us start our life together. It's like having the best landlord ever, except you actually care about us. The best landlord ever. Except landlords got paid rent, and landlords had legal recourse when tenants stopped paying, and landlords didn't get emotionally manipulated into funding their tenants' luxury vacations. I opened my laptop and pulled up the website for Ross & Gage Law, Marvin's firm. Then I opened a new email and began typing. Marvin, I need to schedule an appointment to discuss property rights and tenant eviction procedures. Also, I want to explore options for selling a property that's currently occupied by non-paying tenants. How quickly can we move on this? I hit send before I could second-guess myself. My phone immediately buzzed with a text from Janelle. Franklin, having the most amazing time. Ethan is doing so much better. We'll call you when we get back to share all the good news. Thank you again for everything. Everything, as if stealing $15,000 and lying about a medical emergency was just everything, a minor detail in the grand story of their lives. I deleted the text without responding and went back to studying the house documents. Somewhere in those papers was the key to making them understand that actions have consequences, that generosity has limits, and that even the most patient person can reach a breaking point. The calendar reminder popped up again. Deed transfer meeting, E&J. At this time, instead of deleting it, I changed it to something else. Property sale consultation, Marvin Ross. If they wanted to play games with my generosity, they were about to learn that I'd been playing by different rules all along. Marvin's office hadn't changed much in the 5 years since my divorce proceedings. Same heavy wooden desk, same wall of law books that probably cost more than most people's cars, same smell of leather and old paper that somehow conveyed both authority and permanence. But this time, I wasn't there as a victim of someone else's choices. This time, I was there to make some choices of my own. "Show me everything," Marvin said without preamble, gesturing to the folder of documents I'd brought. I spread the papers across his desk: the house deed, the original purchase agreement, the informal rental arrangement, bank statements showing the pattern of missed payments, screenshots of their social media posts, and the credit card statements showing charges from Bali Paradise Resort. Marvin studied each document carefully, occasionally making notes on his legal pad. When he got to the Instagram screenshots, he let out a low whistle. "They're not even trying to hide it, are they?" "That's what I don't understand," I said. "It's like they think I'm too stupid or too passive to connect the dots. Or they think you're too emotionally invested to do anything about it, even if you do connect them." Marvin looked up at me over his reading glasses. "Franklin, from a legal standpoint, this is straightforward. The house is yours, free and clear. They have no lease agreement, no legal right to occupancy, and they're in violation of your informal rental arrangement by non-payment. What are my options? Several. You can initiate eviction proceedings, which would take about 60 days and cost you legal fees. You can negotiate a voluntary departure, which depends on their cooperation. Or," he paused, tapping his pen against the desk, "you can sell the property." "Even with them living in it?" "It's your property, Franklin. You can sell it whenever you want. The new owners would inherit the tenant situation, but given that there's no formal lease and they're not paying rent, any buyer would have grounds for immediate eviction." The idea was appealing in its simplicity, but something about it felt incomplete. "What about the money they stole?" "The credit card fraud is a separate issue. You could file criminal charges, but that's a long process with uncertain outcomes. However," Marvin leaned back in his chair, the wheels creaking softly. "If you sold the house, the proceeds could be used to pay off their debts, with any remainder going to you as compensation for their breach of your agreement." "How much is the house worth now?" Marvin pulled up a real estate website on his computer and entered the address. Based on recent comparable sales in that neighborhood, I'd estimate around $340,000. You paid $280,000 3 years ago, plus they've done renovations that probably added some value. $340,000. Minus the $15,000 they'd stolen, minus whatever I'd spent on maintenance and property taxes over the years, I'd still be looking at a substantial profit. More importantly, I'd be looking at justice. How quickly could we move on a sale? In this market, with the right pricing and a good realtor, you could have offers within a week. Cash buyers could close in 2 weeks. And they wouldn't have any legal recourse. Marvin shook his head firmly. "None whatsoever. The deed is clear, your ownership is undisputed, and they have no legal claim to the property. They might not like it, but liking it isn't a legal requirement." I left Marvin's office with a folder full of paperwork and a referral to Jenna Hastings, a realtor who specialized in quick sales. But before I called her, I wanted to gather a little more evidence of just how thoroughly I'd been played. The bank branch where I'd opened the credit card was busy with the usual afternoon crowd, but Patricia Holloway, the loan officer who'd helped me, was available for a quick consultation. "Mr. Mercer, how did everything work out with your son's medical emergency?" "That's actually what I wanted to discuss with you. Can you show me exactly what charges have been made on that account?" Patricia pulled up my account on her computer, her expression growing concerned as she scrolled through the transactions. "Sir, I'm seeing multiple charges from Indonesian merchants. Resort bookings, restaurant charges, spa services. These don't appear to be medical expenses." "No," I said quietly. "They don't. Mr. Mercer, if someone has been using your card fraudulently, it's not fraud in the legal sense. I gave the card to my daughter-in-law for what I believed were legitimate medical expenses. She's been using it for other purposes." Patricia's expression shifted from concern to something that looked like sympathy mixed with professional disapproval. "I see this more often than you might think. Family members who take advantage of generosity." She printed out a detailed statement and handed it to me. "The total charges so far are $18,347. The account is approaching its limit. $18,000. They'd not only spent the original $15,000, but had continued charging additional expenses, apparently confident that I either wouldn't notice or wouldn't do anything about it." "Can you put a hold on the card?" "Absolutely. I can freeze it immediately." "Do that. And send me alerts for any attempted charges going forward." Walking back to my car, I felt a grim satisfaction. They were about to discover that their unlimited expense account had just been closed. That evening, Vera called with more intelligence from the social media front. Franklin, honey, you need to see what's happening with their Bali situation. It's getting ugly. She sent me a series of screenshots from Kyle's Instagram story, the kind of temporary posts that disappeared after 24 hours but that Vera had been diligently capturing. The images told a story of escalating drama. There was Ethan, clearly intoxicated, arguing with hotel security outside what appeared to be a nightclub. There was Janelle, tears streaming down her face, having what looked like a very heated phone conversation. There was Kyle with his arm around the same blonde woman from the earlier video, while Ethan sat alone at the bar in the background. Look at the timestamps, Vera said when she called back. This all happened last night. And look at this. Kyle posted a video of Ethan getting thrown out of the club for starting a fight. The video was shaky and brief, but it clearly showed my son being escorted out by security while shouting something inaudible at someone off camera. He looked drunk, disheveled, and absolutely nothing like someone recovering from major surgery. There's more, Vera continued. Janelle posted something on her story about learning who people really are when they show their true colors, and some bridges need to be burned for your own protection. I think their marriage is falling apart in real time. Part of me felt a perverse satisfaction that their stolen vacation was turning into a disaster. But another part, the part that remembered teaching Ethan to ride a bike, helping him with homework, celebrating his business successes, felt genuinely sad that it had come to this. My phone buzzed with a notification. The credit card company alerting me to a declined transaction. Someone had just tried to charge $2,400 at Bali Paradise Resort spa services and been denied. Within minutes, my phone was ringing, Janelle's number. Franklin. Her voice was strained, higher pitched than usual. There's been some kind of mistake with the credit card. It's not working. It's not a mistake, I said calmly. I froze the account. You... what? Why would you do that? Because I found out there was no surgery, Janelle. Because I know you're in Bali spending my money on a vacation while lying to me about medical emergencies. There was a long pause. When she spoke again, her tone had shifted from panicked to defensive. Franklin, I don't know what you think you know, but Ethan is fine. He's recovering beautifully. Sometimes healing happens in unexpected ways. Healing from what, exactly? The hospital has no record of any surgery. You called the hospital? Now she sounded genuinely angry. Franklin, that's a violation of privacy. You had no right? I had no right? I'm the one paying for this supposed medical treatment. I think that gives me some right to verify that it actually exists. You're being paranoid and controlling. This is exactly why Ethan has such a complicated relationship with you. You can't just trust us to handle our own lives. The gaslighting was breathtaking in its audacity. Somehow my discovery of their deception had become evidence of my own character flaws. Where's Ethan? I asked. Let me talk to him. He's resting. The time difference has him confused, and he's been having some side effects from the medication. What medication, Janelle? For what condition? I don't have to explain our medical decisions to you, Franklin. You're not his doctor. No, but I'm apparently his bank. She hung up on me. An hour later, I got a text from Ethan. Dad, sorry about the confusion with the card. There was a mix-up with the billing. Everything is fine here. Janelle is just stressed about the medical stuff. We'll call you when we get back and explain everything. The text felt scripted, like something Janelle had dictated. The tone was wrong. The phrasing wasn't how Ethan usually communicated. Even his lies had become secondhand. That night, I called Jenna Hastings. Ms. Hastings, I have a property I need to sell quickly. It's currently occupied by tenants, but they have no lease and are not paying rent. How fast can we move? Mr. Mercer, in the current market, a well-priced property can move very quickly. If you're motivated to sell and willing to price competitively, we could have offers within days. I'm very motivated. When can you come see the property? I can be there tomorrow morning. Will the tenants need to be present for the showing? The tenants are currently out of the country. We'll have full access. Perfect. I'll see you at 10 a.m. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and really thought about what I was about to do. This wasn't just about the money, though the money was significant. This wasn't just about the lies, though the lies were unforgivable. This was about respect, about boundaries, about the difference between being generous and being taken for a fool. For 3 years, I'd been the solution to every problem, the answer to every financial crisis, the safety net that allowed them to live beyond their means without consequences. I'd told myself I was helping them build a life together, supporting them while they got established. What I'd actually been doing was enabling them to treat me like a resource to be exploited rather than a person to be respected. My laptop chimed with another Instagram notification. Janelle had posted a new photo, a sunset view from what was clearly the resort balcony with a caption that read, Sometimes the universe tests you to see if you're ready for the next level. Grateful for this time to reflect and grow. Blessed, shakt, growth, tact, trust, the journey. The universe tests you, as if their deception and my reaction to it were some kind of spiritual journey rather than the predictable consequences of their choices. I closed the laptop and went to bed, setting my alarm for early the next morning. Jenna Hastings was coming to evaluate the property, and I wanted to be ready with all the information she'd need to price it for a quick sale. If Ethan and Janelle wanted to talk about the universe testing people, they were about to get a very comprehensive examination. Jenna Hastings arrived exactly at 10 a.m., driving a silver sedan with magnetic real estate signs on the doors and carrying a leather portfolio that suggested she took her business seriously. At 42, she had the kind of efficient professionalism that came from years of navigating complicated property transactions. Mr. Mercer, I'm Jenna. Beautiful property. I can see why you'd want to move quickly on this. I led her through the house, watching her make notes on everything from the updated kitchen to the hardwood floors to the renovated bathrooms. The improvements Ethan and Janelle had made with my unwitting financing were substantial, and Jenna's expression grew more impressed with each room. The renovations are high quality, she said, running her hand along the granite countertops. Custom cabinetry, professional installation. This easily adds $20,000 to $30,000 to the value. $20,000 to $30,000 in improvements to my house, funded by money they'd claimed they didn't have for rent. What's your timeline for moving? Jenna asked as we finished the tour. I'm flexible. The key is finding the right buyer who can close quickly. In this neighborhood, with these upgrades, I'd recommend listing at $349,000. We'll likely see offers within the first week, possibly above asking if we get multiple buyers interested. $349,000. After paying off the credit card debt and covering the costs of sale, I'd still clear enough to cover every penny they owed me over the past 3 years, plus a substantial amount for the emotional distress they'd caused. How quickly can we get it listed? I can have professional photos done tomorrow, listing uploaded by Thursday. If you're willing to allow showings while the current tenants are away, we can start immediately. The tenants won't be a factor much longer, I said. List it as soon as possible. That afternoon, I met with Marvin again to finalize the legal aspects of the sale. He'd prepared a folder of documents that would protect me from any potential challenges to the transaction. Franklin, I want to make sure you understand the implications of this. Once you sell the property, there's no going back. Your son and his wife will have to find somewhere else to live, and they'll likely be angry about it. They should have thought about that before they stole from me. I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want to make sure you've considered the family ramifications. I had considered them. I'd spent 3 years considering them, making excuses for behavior that would have been unacceptable from strangers, accepting treatment that I would never tolerate from anyone else simply because we shared DNA. Marvin, if a stranger had lied to me about a medical emergency, stolen $15,000 from me, and then posted pictures of their luxury vacation on social media, what would you advise me to do? Press charges and sue for damages. And if a tenant had been living in my property rent-free for 6 months while making expensive improvements without my permission? Evict them immediately. So why should the fact that their family change the consequences of their actions? Marvin nodded slowly. It shouldn't. You're right. I've seen family disputes destroy relationships permanently. The relationship was destroyed when they decided to treat me like a mark in a con game rather than like family. We spent the next hour going over the paperwork, the sale contract, the deed transfer documents, the legal notices that would be required once the property was sold. Everything was straightforward. I owned the house, I had the right to sell it, and the new owners would have the right to determine who lived there. When do you want to tell them? Marvin asked. I don't. Franklin, they're going to find out when they come home. Good. Let them find out the same way I found out about their vacation. As a surprise. That evening, I got a call from Linda. My ex-wife's voice was tense, carefully controlled in the way that meant she was trying not to start an argument. Franklin, I got a very upset call from Janelle. She says you're being unreasonable about their medical expenses. Did she tell you what these medical expenses were for? Ethan's surgery, obviously. Franklin, I know you like to be involved in everything, but they're adults. They can handle their own medical decisions. There was no surgery, Linda. Silence. Then, what do you mean? I mean, there was no surgery, no medical emergency, no hospital procedure. They lied to me to get money for a vacation to Bali. That's not possible. Why would they lie about something like that? Because they knew I'd give them money for a medical emergency that I wouldn't give them for a luxury vacation. Franklin, you must be mistaken. Ethan wouldn't. I called the hospital. I checked the credit card statements. I've seen their social media posts from Bali. There's no mistake. Another long silence. When Linda spoke again, her voice was smaller, less certain. Even if that's true, cutting off their credit card while they're traveling is extreme. What if they have a real emergency? Then they can call Kyle Granger. He seems to be enjoying their company. What does that mean? I didn't answer. Linda would find out about their marital problems soon enough, and I wasn't going to be the one to break that news. Franklin, whatever happened, they're still family. Ethan is still your son. Yes, he is. And maybe it's time he learned that being my son comes with responsibilities as well as privileges. I hung up before she could respond. My phone immediately buzzed with a text from Ethan. Dad, Mom says you're upset about the card. Can we talk when we get back? I think there's been some misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? As if fraud and deception were simple communication errors. I didn't respond to the text. The next morning, Jenna called with an update. Franklin, the photographer finished yesterday afternoon, and the pictures look fantastic. I'm uploading the listing this morning. I've already had 2 agents call asking about showings for this weekend. Set up whatever showings you need. I'll make sure you have access. One more thing. I'd recommend putting up the for sale sign as soon as possible. It generates drive-by interest and lets the neighborhood know the property is available. When can you install it? This afternoon, if you'd like. Perfect. That afternoon, I stood in the front yard of the house I'd purchased for my son and watched Jenna's assistant hammer the for sale sign into the lawn. The sign was large, professional, impossible to miss. Bright red letters on a white background. For sale, Jenna Hastings Real Estate, call for showing. Vera Collins appeared at my elbow as if summoned by the sound of the hammer. Franklin, what's this about? I'm selling the house. But what about Ethan and Janelle? What about them? Vera's eyes widened as she processed the implications. Oh my goodness, do they know? They'll know when they get back. When are they coming back? I checked my phone for their flight information, which Janelle had sent me weeks ago when she was still pretending to care about keeping me informed of their plans. Tomorrow afternoon. Vera looked from the sign to me, to the house, and back to the sign. Franklin, this is quite a statement. Yes, I said. It is. That evening, I received one final text from Janelle. Franklin, we're flying home tomorrow. Looking forward to sitting down and clearing up any confusion about the medical expenses. Thank you again for being so supportive during this difficult time. See you soon. Supportive during this difficult time. The difficult time they'd created by lying to me and stealing my money. I deleted the text and went to bed early. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. I was standing in the driveway at 3:47 p.m. when the Uber rounded the corner onto Maple Street. The timing was perfect. Jenna had scheduled a showing for 4 p.m., and the potential buyers, a young couple named Trevor and Monica Walsh, were already inside with her, examining the renovated kitchen and discussing mortgage options. The for sale sign stood prominently in the front yard, exactly where anyone pulling into the driveway would see it immediately. I'd positioned myself next to my car, holding the folder of legal documents Marvin had prepared, wearing my best suit and the kind of calm expression that came from knowing exactly what was about to happen. Ethan and Janelle climbed out of the Uber with the slow, disoriented movements of people who'd just spent 20 hours traveling. They were both tanned, relaxed, carrying expensive luggage that I'd apparently helped pay for. Janelle was wearing a flowing sundress and sandals that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payment. Ethan had on a linen shirt and designer sunglasses, looking like he'd just stepped off a resort brochure. They saw the sign at exactly the same moment. Janelle's face went through a series of expressions, confusion, disbelief, then something approaching panic. Ethan just stood frozen, his mouth slightly open, staring at the bright red letters as if they might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Dad? Ethan's voice was uncertain, higher pitched than usual. What's going on here? I'm selling the house, I said calmly. You're what? Janelle dropped her designer handbag, the contents spilling across the driveway. Franklin, what are you talking about? This is our house. No, I said, opening the folder and pulling out the deed. This is my house. It's always been my house, and I've decided to sell it. The front door opened, and Jenna emerged with the Walsh couple. Trevor and Monica looked to be in their early 30s, the kind of eager first-time homebuyers who'd been saving for years to afford something in this neighborhood. They stopped short when they saw the scene in the driveway. Mr. Mercer? Jenna's voice was carefully professional. Is everything all right? Everything's fine, Jenna. Trevor, Monica, I'd like you to meet the current tenants, Ethan and Janelle. They were just leaving. Leaving? Ethan looked from me to the young couple to Jenna, his confusion evident. Dad, I don't understand what's happening here. It's simple, I said, handing him a copy of the deed. I own this house. I'm selling this house. The new owners will decide who gets to live here, and I suspect it won't be tenants who don't pay rent. Janelle had recovered enough to shift into attack mode. Franklin, you can't do this. We have rights. We've been living here for 3 years. Yes, you have. Rent-free for the past 6 months, after I was generous enough to let you live here while you got on your feet. How did that work out, by the way? Did you get on your feet, or did you get on a plane to Bali? Trevor and Monica exchanged glances, clearly realizing they'd walked into the middle of a family drama. But they didn't leave. If anything, they seemed more interested in the property now that it was clear the current occupants were being evicted. This is about the credit card, isn't it? Ethan's voice was getting louder, more desperate. Dad, I can explain. Please do. Explain how your emergency surgery turned into a luxury vacation. Explain how your life-threatening medical condition was cured by poolside cocktails and spa treatments. Vera Collins appeared on her front porch, drawn by the commotion. Within minutes, 2 other neighbors had found reasons to be working in their front yards. The audience was growing. Franklin, you're being ridiculous, Janelle snapped. Ethan was sick, and the trip was part of his recovery. Sometimes healing happens in different ways than you expect. What exactly was he healing from, Janelle? Because the hospital has no record of any surgery, any procedure, or any medical treatment whatsoever. You called the hospital? Ethan looked genuinely shocked. Dad, that's a violation of privacy. I called the hospital because I was worried about my son who'd supposedly just had major surgery. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that son was posting volleyball videos from Bali instead of recovering in a hospital bed. Monica Walsh whispered something to her husband, and he nodded. They were still interested in the house. If anything, the drama was making them more eager to close quickly and get the current occupants out. Mr. Mercer, Trevor said politely, when would the property be available for occupancy? As soon as we close, I replied. The current tenants have no lease agreement and will be vacating immediately. We are not vacating. Janelle's voice was shrill now, loud enough that windows were opening up and down the street. This is our home. We've put thousands of dollars into renovations. Yes, you have, I agreed. Thank you for that. The improvements will help the house sell faster. Dad, please. Ethan's tone shifted, becoming the pleading voice I remembered from his childhood when he'd been caught in some mischief. Can we just talk about this privately? We can work something out. We could have worked something out 3 years ago when you were supposed to take over the mortgage. We could have worked something out 6 months ago when you stopped paying rent. We could have worked something out 2 weeks ago when you asked for money for a medical emergency instead of lying to me. It wasn't a lie. Janelle was crying now, but her tears looked more like rage than sadness. Ethan was stressed. He needed a break, and the trip was therapeutic. Therapeutic? I repeated. Is that what you call spending $18,000 of my money on resort charges, spa treatments, and luxury dining? The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Trevor and Monica looked impressed despite themselves. This was clearly a high-end property if the current tenants had been spending that kind of money on a single vacation. 18,000? Ethan's voice cracked. Dad, it wasn't supposed to be that much. You just what? You just thought I was too stupid to check the statements? You just thought I'd never find out? You just thought I'd keep paying for your lifestyle indefinitely? Marvin's car pulled up to the curb, and my lawyer got out with his own folder of documents. He'd insisted on being present for this confrontation, partly for legal protection and partly because he wanted to see Janelle's reaction when she realized how thoroughly she'd been outmaneuvered. Franklin, Marvin said, nodding to me before turning to Ethan and Janelle. I have the final sale documents here. The property closes next Friday, and the new owners will take possession immediately. Sale documents? Ethan looked like he might be sick. Dad, you can't just sell our house. It's not your house, Marvin said firmly. It never was your house. The deed has always been in your father's name, and he has every legal right to sell his property. But we live here, Janelle was hyperventilating now. We've been living here for 3 years. We have stuff here. Our whole life is here. You have until the closing date to remove your belongings, I said. After that, anything left becomes the property of the new owners. Trevor Walsh stepped forward, clearly seeing an opportunity. Mr. Mercer, would you consider any of the furnishings as part of the sale? The kitchen appliances, the furniture in the living room? That depends on what the current tenants leave behind, I replied. You can't do this, Janelle screamed. Ethan, Tell him he can't do this. But Ethan was staring at the deed in his hands, finally understanding the magnitude of what had just happened. Dad, please. We made a mistake, okay? We shouldn't have lied about the surgery. But selling our house? That's nuclear. Your mistake was thinking this was your house to begin with. Franklin, be reasonable. Janelle tried one more time, her voice shifting to the manipulative tone she'd used so effectively before. We're family. We can work this out. We'll pay you back. We'll start paying rent again. You'll what? You'll promise to change? You'll promise to respect me? You'll promise to treat me like family instead of like a bank account? I shook my head. I've heard those promises before, Janelle. They're worthless. Dad, come on, Ethan pleaded. It's not like we're strangers. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And maybe it's time you learned what that means. That's when Kyle Granger's voice cut through the tension like a knife. Well, this is awkward. Everyone turned to see Kyle walking up the street, apparently having been dropped off by another car. He was still tan from Bali, still wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that suggested money was never a concern. But there was something smug in his expression, something that suggested he was enjoying the chaos. Kyle? Ethan's voice was confused. What are you doing here? I was hoping to talk to Janelle, Kyle said, his eyes fixed on her. We have some unfinished business from Bali. The silence that followed was deafening. Janelle went pale beneath her tan, and Ethan's confusion shifted to something darker. Unfinished business? Ethan repeated slowly. Oh, come on, man, Kyle said with a laugh. You were so drunk most of the trip, I'm surprised you remember anything. But Janelle and I had some very interesting conversations about the future. What kind of conversations? Ethan's voice was dangerous now. The kind where she told me she was thinking about leaving you, Kyle said casually. The kind where she said she was tired of being married to a man-child who couldn't support himself without Daddy's money. Kyle, shut up, Janelle hissed, but it was too late. And then there were the conversations we had without words, Kyle continued, grinning. You know, when you were passed out drunk and she was feeling lonely and unappreciated. Ethan lunged at Kyle with a roar of rage, but Kyle was ready for it. They went down in a tangle of limbs on the front lawn, rolling across the grass while Janelle screamed and the neighbors pulled out their phones to record the spectacle. Ethan, stop, Janelle was crying hysterically now. It wasn't like that. He's lying. But Ethan wasn't listening. He was throwing wild punches while Kyle laughed and easily deflected most of them. They crashed into the for sale sign, bending it at an angle but not knocking it down. Gentlemen! Marvin's voice cut through the chaos with the authority of 30 years in courtrooms. That's enough. Trevor and Monica Walsh were backing toward their car, but they were still watching with fascination. This was better than reality television. Kyle, get out of here, I said firmly. This doesn't concern you. Actually, it does, Kyle said, standing up and brushing grass off his shirt while Ethan sat on the ground, breathing hard. Janelle and I made some plans in Bali. Plans that don't include him. I never made any plans with you, Janelle shrieked. You're delusional. Really? Kyle pulled out his phone and started scrolling through messages. Because I have some very interesting text messages that say otherwise. Should I read them out loud? Don't you dare, Janelle warned. How about the one where you said you were done pretending to be happy with someone who can't even pay his own bills? Or the one where you said you deserved better than a man who needs his daddy to buy him a house? Ethan's face went white. Janelle? Tell me he's lying. Janelle looked from Ethan to Kyle to me to the growing crowd of neighbors, her perfect vacation tan making her look sickly under the afternoon sun. I was upset. We were fighting, and I said things I didn't mean. You meant them, Kyle said confidently. You meant them when you said them, and you meant them when you were in my room at 3 a.m. You what? Ethan's voice broke on the words. It was one time, Janelle screamed, and we were broken up. You were seeing that blonde woman from the bar. We weren't broken up. We had a fight. Married people fight. We were broken up in my mind. The neighbors were getting quite a show. Vera Collins had moved to the edge of her property line for a better view, and I could see at least 4 phones recording the meltdown. This is ridiculous, I said loudly, cutting through their screaming match. Trevor, Monica, would you like to see the rest of the property? Actually, Trevor said, looking around at the chaos. We've seen enough. Jenna, can we put in an offer today? Absolutely, Jenna replied, apparently unfazed by the domestic drama playing out on the lawn. I'll draw up the paperwork this evening. You can't sell our house, Janelle screamed at me. This is our home. Your home? I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. Your home is wherever you can afford to live on your own income, which based on the past 3 years appears to be nowhere. Dad, please, Ethan tried one more time, struggling to his feet. We can fix this. We can work it out. No, Ethan, we can't. You made your choice when you decided to lie to me about a medical emergency. You made your choice when you stole my money for a vacation. You made your choice when you let her treat me like a fool for 3 years. I never. You did. You both did. And now you get to live with the consequences. Kyle was still standing there with his phone out, scrolling through messages. Should I tell him about the other guys, Janelle? The ones from the resort bar? Other guys? Ethan's voice was hollow now. Kyle, I swear to God, if you don't shut up, Janelle started. What other guys? Ethan demanded. Oh, this is rich, Kyle laughed. You really don't know, do you? Your wife spent more time in other men's rooms than in yours. I wasn't even the first one. Ethan looked at Janelle with an expression I'd never seen before, complete devastation mixed with dawning understanding. Is that true? Janelle's silence was answer enough. 3 years, Ethan said quietly. 3 years of marriage, and this is who you really are. Don't you dare judge me, Janelle exploded. You're a child. You can't support a wife. You can't pay your own bills. You can't even stand up to your father. What did you expect me to do? I expected you to be my wife. I expected you to be a man. The words hung in the air like a slap. Even Kyle looked uncomfortable now, as if he hadn't expected the conversation to get quite this brutal. Well, I said into the silence, I think that settles the question of whether you'll be working things out. Jenna stepped forward with her professional smile firmly in place. Mr. Mercer, I'll have the purchase agreement ready for review tomorrow morning. Trevor, Monica, thank you for your interest. I think you'll be very happy here. We will, Monica said, looking around the neighborhood appreciatively. It seems like a very dynamic community. Oh, it won't be this dynamic once the current tenants move out, Vera called from her porch. This is definitely not normal for Maple Street. Ethan was staring at the house like he was seeing it for the first time. Dad, where are we supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore, son. But we don't have anywhere. You should have thought about that before you decided to bite the hand that feeds you. Janelle was crying again, but this time it looked like genuine despair rather than manipulative tears. Franklin, please. I know we made mistakes, but we can't just be homeless. You're not homeless. You're adults who need to find your own housing, like every other adult in the world. With what money? Ethan asked desperately. You know our financial situation. Your financial situation is no longer my concern. You're 33 years old, Ethan. It's time to figure it out. Kyle was backing away now, apparently realizing that his dramatic revelation had accomplished more destruction than he'd intended. Janelle, call me when you get this sorted out. Don't call her, Ethan said firmly. Don't ever call her again. That's not your decision to make anymore, Kyle replied with a shrug. Is it, Janelle? Janelle looked from Kyle to Ethan to me, and for the first time since I'd known her, she seemed genuinely lost for words. I think this conversation is over, Marvin said, stepping forward with his lawyer's instinct for knowing when to end a scene. Ethan, Janelle, you have until the closing date to remove your belongings. After that,